We're recording.
Yes,
Okay,
just started that.
excellent. Okay. Well, again, welcome everyone. Happy Earth Day. We have the Impervious Coverage Code Amendment. This is a public input meeting, so we do want to hear your thoughts. And I've got a delay on my screen already. Let's see. There we go. This is one of two public input meetings. So if any of you have to leave or you would like to join us again, we'll have the same meeting tomorrow at noon. And again, that will be the same meeting. And again, I'm Lori, and I'm senior planner with Planning and Urban Design. Sarah May is our host, and we have our co-host with us, Rexter Chambers from Planning and Urban Design. So why are we even talking about this? Why are we here? Well, the City Plan Commission requested that for our staff to initiate this code amendment to our Dallas Development Code, which lays out our regulations for the city of Dallas to limit impervious coverage for both residential and non-residential lots. And by limiting the impervious coverage will align with many of our city policies and plans that seek to reduce flooding and the heat island effect that it gets exacerbated by the impervious surfaces. So some of the issues, again, we have flooding, and I know we've all experienced, at least seen that, and many have experienced that. And that's due to a lot of impervious surfaces where the rainwater, of course, can infiltrate into the ground and recharge the groundwater. Other issues that we experience here, we're very familiar with, is high heat and temperatures. And again, that's exacerbated also by dark, even pervious surfaces, but the darker the surface, the higher the heat. And as you can see in these photos, this parking lot was clocked basically at 160 degrees in the high temperatures. Flash flooding issues, again, that's caused a lot of times by the infiltration, lack of infiltration of the rainwater into the soil. We have pollutants and issues of debris and pollutants that get into our fragile rivers and streams from that stormwater runoff. We also have water quality degradation due to the stormwater runoff. And of course, we have flooding events, big flooding events that also can occur in our rivers and streams here. And of course, destruction of property, wildlife habitat, and ecosystems. And then again, scorching heat, that occurs because the heat by all these impervious surfaces gets absorbed into the dark surfaces. And then our urban areas experience higher temperatures because that heat gets trapped into the impervious surfaces. And then with the lack of trees, you have little shade, and you know, we're getting hotter and hotter as far as our temperatures in our urban areas. And of course, that leads to also some health issues, you know, for humans, animals, ecosystems from these higher temperatures. And of course, we have air quality issues also, that with fewer trees, we don't have the ability for those pollutants and particulate matter to get filtered for the air that we breathe. Just to show you some perspective, and I know many of you have seen this in within the area, but the picture on the left is a four-car driveway for a duplex versus the one at the top right, which is a single-car driveway for a duplex. And then on the lower or bottom right, you see just a single car driveway with a ribbon driveway. So fairly, differing levels or percentages of impervious and pervious surfaces. So what we're proposing, and again, just to kind of go back, this is just a draft code amendment proposal ideas. We're still in the public input stage. We have not gone to our public hearing to bring this before our zoning ordinance advisory committee yet. We hope to do that toward the end of May, but we definitely want your input. So we are proposing a required maximum impervious coverage percentage for both residential and non-residential. So what does that look like, or what could that look like is what we have depicted here. For residential uses, the proposal is to have a maximum impervious coverage percentage of just the required front yard, and that would be 40% for most of the residential, except that agricultural residential development would be 30%. And that's, of course, our agricultural properties, or you have a much greater setback, you have more of a rural feel to it. So that's why that's 30%. And so what we have depicted, this is a typical 50-foot wide lot with a 25-foot required front yard setback. And that's per the zoning. This is an R75 single family district, which requires a 25-foot front yard setback. So that gives you 1,250 square feet of that front yard area, which is again your lot width by your 25-foot setback. So that's 500 square feet impervious coverage, basically, that you have to deal with or left over. So, and this gives you still basically the 2-car driveway, give you a little, landing to the front porch area, a walkway, 100 square feet, or you could have, more of kind of a ribbon type driveway with, an even larger front porch area, some little walkways. So as you can see, you still have quite a bit of impervious surface that could still be in your front yard. So that's the residential side. For non-residential uses, the proposal is maximum impervious coverage percentage of just the parking areas, and that would be 80% for most of the non-residential uses, excuse me, with the exception of any of those parking areas that are on or abutting a parkway street, and those would be 60%. And in just a minute, we'll look at what that means. Essentially, those are the streets that track or go along or abut our watershed areas, our very vulnerable flood-prone areas like Trinity River and Joe's Creek, Bachman Lake, etc. So, but as you can see, this is a drawing or a depiction of 80% impervious coverage. So what you could have is basically your 12-foot areas where you might have, some sort of a pervious surface, and then, some additional landscaping as well. And you could still have a lot of your parking areas, your driveways and your parking areas could still be impervious. So not too difficult to achieve. And these drawings, I just want to point out, are drawn up by our very talented staff member, Don Rains, in Planning and Urban Design. So this is a map of our parkway streets as well as all of our other street types. We call it street typology. This is out of our complete streets map. And I have a little cutout here because I know that's very difficult to see, where you have this green star. This is the Bachman Lake area. And so the Parkway Street that we're talking about is here in the dark green. And again, that's meant to, that's a parkway street that is meant to have a little bit more protection for our more vulnerable flood-prone areas. And I have a few more to show you if I can get cooperation with okay, there we go. This is just a larger view of the Trinity River. And as you can see, we have some of the, not all, but some of the parkway streets in the dark green that pretty much track or follow that flood zone area for the protection of the creek. And then, sorry about that, that advanced. And then here is just another example. This is White Rock Lake, where again, you can see a little bit larger detail where you have in bright green the streets that are mapped to show where the city is seeking greater protection of those vulnerable watersheds. Okay, so those are the base requirements or base maximum impervious coverage percentages that we were thinking about for residential and non-residential. We also have some incentives to go a little bit higher that may be possible, and we'll cover the residential first. So you could have a maximum 5% additional impervious coverage for any of the following, and we have a few of those. This one is showing some water collection methods. This is a rain barrel. And so this, let's say you had two of them, and we'll get to the others in a minute. The maximum you could get from these would be a total of 10% maximum possible combined. And again, I did want to point out that the additional impervious coverage percentage does not apply to lots abutting parkway streets either. They're just, they would be 60% on the non-residential side for the parking areas, and the 40% for a single family, just not eligible for any additional impervious coverage. Okay, and then also some of the other potential incentives for residential, maximum 5% additional could be pervious paving. And in this one, in the first photo to the left, these are townhomes with brick pavers. And then of course you have single family driveways with some basalt paving stones. Okay, and then you could potentially, you may be eligible for a maximum 10% additional impervious coverage for any of the following greening factors. And again, it would be a total 10% maximum possible. They don't accumulate, they're not 10% each, they're 10% for any of them. So your greening factors, we're looking at maybe some green infrastructure, some rain gardens in front yard, or some additional trees. The last photo just happens to have rain garden and pervious pavers in the front yard. So, that all in an effort to get more infiltration into the ground. Okay, and on the non-residential uses side for incentives, maximum 5% additional impervious coverage for any of the following. And again, this is a combined total of 10% maximum. You can't go above that. So, for instance, if you let's say you're not abutting a parkway street, you're just on another street that's not a parkway street, and so your required impervious coverage for your parking areas would be 80%, and you gave or offered one of these methods for the parking areas for non-residential, you could be eligible for an additional 5%. So that would be if you did one of them, it would be 85% maximum. Of course, if you did two, 90% is the maximum you could get for any of the incentives. So what does that look like? So pervious off-street parking areas. Here you see pea gravel. And then here it just shows a variety of pervious pathways, pedestrian pathways. This is a pervious turf block that's being used for parking spaces. Then also eligible for the 5% would be your water management techniques. These are cisterns. You could have overland flow or disconnected downspouts. And these are all in an effort to recycle water and divert it to your landscaping and your parking areas. You could have cool paving. This is a specific coating that greatly reduces the temperature of the paving for the parking areas. Same thing here. It's a lighter, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Very sensitive now. This is a lighter colored paving that reduces that heat island effect. They actually happen to have bioswale running through there too, but our purpose was to show the lighter colored paving. And then you have the painted pavers in the parking area here, again, all in an effort to reduce the heat. And then other methods that would reduce the stormwater or heat island effect. And here it's showing a green roof for bicycle parking. Again, we're specifically talking about parking areas here, so it would have to be in the parking area. This shows a blue roof that helps to collect water. And then the last one is a walkway that has solar PV panels. So you're also generating electricity in addition to providing some shade. And the photo is not of a parking area, but that's where it would apply. Okay, and then so also a little bit more percentage, you could get up to a maximum additional 10% impervious coverage for any of the following, with again a total maximum 10%, going up to 90% maximum total of your base impervious coverage, and one of these items in the parking areas. And that's green infrastructure, showing basically bioswales and rain gardens in the parking areas and abutting the parking areas. Those would be eligible and would count. Plantings abutting all off-street surface parking areas. Obviously you can, if you do it adjacent to your parking areas, you could do a berm, with some hedges. The last photo is showing, a lot of trees. If you notice, they have a sidewalk in between both of the planting areas. the area that would count or be eligible would be the one nearest or adjacent or abutting the parking area, on the inside side of the sidewalk, if you will, because the other side is public right of way. So we're talking about private property right now. So that would provide a lot of shade and infiltration into the ground. So you really, and that's why these are more eligible for 10%. They carry a little bit more weight, because they are the greening techniques that actually have multiple benefits. They not only, reduce the stormwater runoff and help infiltration into the ground, but they also reduce the heat, so that you have more than one benefit. And then solar trees, this third section here, solar PV trees that would greatly reduce the heat. This one happens to have EV chargers too, below that. So, again, you've got multiple benefits going here. And then, it could also, help somewhat with the runoff. Solar coatings on the ground generate electricity, and then solar farms. So, and the last technique here in this last series of photos is within the interior of the site, pervious materials for the parking areas. So 10% would be if you put the parking behind the buildings and you provide the pervious materials, any one of these. And then lastly, for the 10% additional impervious coverage, you could have multi-use areas where they're predominantly green open space areas, and they just have occasional use for event type parking, maybe overflow parking. But for the most part, they're open and they're green. They're natural type areas. These are just photo credits for a lot of the photos. And oops, get this to show. I think we are at our question and answer part of the presentation. That's really all I have. I wanted to keep it brief so that to give you an opportunity for input and questions. And I don't, Sarah, do we have questions in the chat already? I'm sorry, I haven't been able to.
Yes, just a few ones. I also wanted to plug the that there, if you go to the chat bar on the it'll probably be on the right side of your screen. There's a little thing that says chat. Just in case you were like, I can't find that earlier. You can go there at the top of the chat. So like the earliest ones, there's a few links that I put in. The first link is like a survey, kind of a comment form. If you'd rather just submit like a private comment, we'd be, you can do it that way. And also a link to our case specific website. So Lori already has some materials uploaded on there. We'll be posting this recording and the presentation on that on that website. And we'll also be continually updating it as this moves through the process. And so I guess the first question would really be about it applying for new construction only, and if it's just for residential and non-residential. So I did make an attempt in the chat to try to answer that. So if that was unclear, please let us know. But basically, yes, there are two different ways that we're proposing. One way for residential, which would just be looking at the front yard setback. And then another way for non-residential, which would be in the surface parking area. And it would definitely apply to new construction, but Lori has also thought about some triggers that might trigger compliance with it, even for an existing building. And I don't know if you went over that or want to, but maybe a summary would be that if they're going to add impervious coverage to that area, at that point they would start to determine if it hits that trigger or not to be in compliance. Is that about right, Lori?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so it would be triggered on the residential side when the cumulative area of is increased more than 200 square feet in the required front yard. And then for non-residential, it would be triggered for the cumulative area of impervious coverage increase of more than 2,000 square feet within a 24-month period. So, we're trying to kind of align it with how some of the other ordinances work, like the landscaping. That's basically how it applies as far as the 2,000 square feet.
Mhm.
So
And
hopefully that
200 square feet for the residential side is usually about the size of a parking space.
right.
So if you think about then paving that much area in your neighborhood, that might trigger compliance. Let's see. I would also say, let's see. A question was in the chat about the parkway streets.
Okay.
And it said, are parkway streets currently less than 60%? And I would say, so Parkway Street, so we don't currently have a requirement or a limitation on impervious surfaces. So this would be a new proposal, a new factor for the city to consider when someone is asking, hey, can I do some paving? So there is no special requirement right now that's different for parkway streets.
Right.
The proposal Larry was presenting is to make sure that we are being conscientious around those parkway streets in particular.
Right.
And so they don't get as many like uh, incentives to increase their base.
Correct. They're not
Impervious
eligible.
coverage that's proposed. Yeah.
Correct.
Do you want to add anything to that, Lori? Or
I think you covered it. Yeah, this is a new proposal. So that's why we definitely want to hear your feedback, your input. It's we're trying to have it to where it's effective, but it's also flexible enough to be achievable. On the residential side, um, by doing it in the required front yard only, that's where you have typically your larger setback area, required front setback. And, of course, a lot of times you have your impervious surface there with your driveway a lot of times is in the front yard, but it also gives you flexibility, you know, elsewhere on your lot, to have your home and your lifestyle fit your needs. And then also the calculation's fairly easy. Once you know the width of your lot and you know what your required setback is, you know what your impervious coverage area is, and you just take that percentage, that 40%, and um, so, again, we're trying to do, I guess, have it to where it's a somewhat lighter touch, a little more, conservative, but effective. And like a lot of the other cities do regulate impervious surfaces. But we're trying to suit it to or tailor it to Dallas.
one other question that I don't know the answer to, maybe Lori does, was how many degrees hotter is covered or shaded impervious surfaces than grass? I'm sure that's a science question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very first.
It says, how many degrees hotter is covered or shaded impervious surfaces than grass?
Oh,
And
it can be, I mean, from what I've read, it can be, 10 degrees or more hotter. And I know, we've all probably experienced at least how it feels. I don't know that I can give you the exact percentage. I know we do have in our smart surfaces, we have a smart surfaces coalition, one of the city partners that has some great resources for us that show just different examples of surfaces. I don't know that they compare grass, but they'll compare the temperatures like I showed in one of the earlier slides. How the different degrees of heat from a lighter surface versus a darker surface, shaded versus non-shaded. But I think we've all experienced how it feels at least to walk with no shoes on, barefooted on, pavement in the heat of the summer where, you can't even, you can't. I mean, it just burns your feet. And what do you typically do? I know I do. I just rush, run to the grass and get relief, instant relief really right there, where my feet aren't burning. But yeah, I don't have a specific, it's gonna vary. Um, it's gonna vary surface to surface. Um, but yeah, it can be, 10 to 15 degrees or so hotter.
right. And then Jay had a question. It says, can you please address compliance and enforcement? He said, for example, when will homeowners or builders have to certify impervious cover compliance? If they are later found to have exceeded the limit, does the city have authority to require remedial action? And I'll give it a shot and break it down into questions. I know that was a lot for Lori to just listen to. So I'd say yes. So if council does adopt some version of this, which we still kind of have a longer road ahead of us to get it to council because it needs to go through several other steps in the public hearing process. But usually council, when they approve code amendments, it's effective immediately, but it does not retroactively apply to things that are already done. So it's supposed to be effective immediately, usually in permitting. If they already have a permit that's in review, they vest those rights under that application that came in before the ordinance was in place. Council could say it's effective in 6 months, they could say it's effective in 2 years, or it could be immediately. It's still up to council to decide, but they never go back and make it retroactive. Or I haven't seen it happen like that. And so, um, yes, so for new permits that come in after it's effective, they will have to show that it complies with the ordinance to get their permit. If they have later found to have exceeded it, code compliance and community prosecution and all that can take action to get them into compliance, whatever that may require. So, which, who knows what that would look like. But yes, and that was also another reason why for residential, we were just looking at the front yard setback. Because it could be, it seems like it's difficult sometimes for people to do some kind of calculations of an entire lot. And just that geometry gets kind of complicated sometimes. So that's why we were trying to focus just on the front yard to make it easier for code compliance to see and enforce. And anyway, so that was kind of our intention on that. Same thing for the parking lot. It might be a little bit more complicated geometry whenever they take into account all the landscaping islands and all that stuff. But I think they can get there for non-residential
Well,
developments.
if I might also, on the non-residential side, our studies have, several of our studies and even some of the city plans have, acknowledged, indicated that, of course, as we know, the parking areas contribute largely to the impervious surfaces that we have. And so they were basically also said to be in at least one of our studies, our green stormwater study that was done for the city, that the parking areas are really the biggest bang for the buck. And if you think about it, it's a large contributor, but it's also very easy. I mean, I shouldn't say easy, but it seems to have more options that make sense to reduce those impervious surfaces while still largely leaving a lot of flexibility for the development. If they can just concentrate on the parking areas, which again are the greatest contributors for the most part on the site. If they can concentrate on those, then they have, just a lot of design flexibility too elsewhere.
Okay, and Chris Dan asked a quick question. He says, so just adding a rain barrel to an existing home would not be a trigger for compliance, and that is true. I think it's for new construction, and the triggers are proposed to be slightly different for residential versus non-residential, but the concept is basically, if you are proposing to add pavement of a certain degree, then compliance would be triggered, with or without a permit. I mean, if you do it without a permit, then you're just in violation of that, or you could be in violation. Same thing for the non-residential side. Since the regulations are kind of focused on the surface parking area, it would depend on if they're proposing a surface parking area or not. So either expanding a parking lot or building new construction to, also contain a surface parking lot.
Yes.
Obviously, if you have a multi-level parking garage, you're not going to get a whole lot of stormwater to filter through concrete levels. So that's why we focus on surface parking areas.
Right. And it would be, sorry, I lost my thought. Goodness. Just lost it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I'll go to the next
Expand
one.
on
It's a good one. It's from Tim Dickey. It's a longer one. It says, do the proposed code changes include requirements for industrial uses in environmentally sensitive watershed areas? And I would say yes, but not just industrial uses. It's just an industrial use is just a variety of a non-residential use. And the environmentally sensitive watershed areas, we are looking to the complete streets parkway streets, as Lori showed on her map, on her slides with the map earlier. So yes, in a nutshell, yes. Many concrete batch plants, truck storage yard, this is part of the question. Many concrete batch plants, truck storage yards, etc., are elevated out of the floodplain and have 100% impervious footprints. And that is true. I would also note that we are making some slight changes to some of our definitions and the triggers for landscaping compliance. Since a lot of our surfaces that are allowed to have vehicles on them when they're not either concrete or asphalt, so let's say crushed concrete, they have to have a very compacted subgrade. And when you have a very compacted subgrade, it doesn't allow water infiltration. So areas with compacted soils are considered impervious surface in the proposed amendments. So, so it is proposed to kind of adjust that loophole or take away that loophole, if you will, so that compacting a whole bunch of natural soil is not going to be a way for them to avoid landscaping requirements. Let's see. And the question was, how long does cool coat paint last? Do you know that, Lori?
I don't know the specific date. I mean, I'm sorry, the specific length of time. Um, I, just from what I've seen from the Smart Surfaces Coalition, it's durable. Um, but I don't have a specific time frame for you. I mean, I would imagine it might require, some maintenance like any other parking surface, but I think it's meant to last at least as long as any other traditional surface.
And then we had a comment that says this seems weighted to water infiltration and not considering the more complex issues that trees and green infrastructure provide to mitigate urban heat. I don't know if if you feel like you want to comment on that or anything, Lori.
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
Yeah, it's the second to last comment in case that helps. It says this seems weighted to water infiltration and not considering the more complex issues that trees and green infrastructure provide to mitigate urban heat.
Actually, it's meant to address both.
Yeah,
Because we do have a lot of and that's why it's weighted, the percentages for the incentives are, like I said, the way that we have them, because the greening factors carry a higher percentage for the incentive. They carry 10% versus, you know, pervious type paving, because that's 5%. Because again, we are looking more for the natural solutions, because again, the heat is a big issue, and that's why in the pictures I did show that, but that's precisely why they're weighted differently, or the percentages are
right.
high for all the greening factors, and adding trees is definitely one of them too, in addition to all the other green infrastructure, the rain gardens, the bioswales.
Mhm. And I would also mention that since it's a code amendment, we kind of have to stay focused on the scope. And since the scope of this is basically establishing a maximum percentage for impervious surfaces, that's really kind of what we have to stay focused on. Um, we have a code reform coming up that is a little overall overarching that might have some room to kind of branch out and think of some other concepts. But we are it's necessary for us to keep something tied back to our impervious surfaces. So and we do have some tree incentives and stuff. So if they add additional trees, they can have a slightly higher percentage of impervious surfaces and
Right.
things like that. So there are some, but they're kind of geared and written as an incentive rather than a requirement to add more trees than what is already required.
Right.
And the one question right after that was, is the city considering this amendment in conjunction with changes to Article 10? And I would say we're not overhauling Article 10 at this point. We are making sure that it's consistent with the terms that are used in Article 10 so that, we're all speaking the same language, across, the development, zoning regulations and landscaping regulations. So there are some items in Article 10, some changes that are included, but they are tied back to impervious surfaces and keeping in that vein so that we stay within our scope. Do you want to add anything to that, Lori? or either?
Yeah, no, I think that covers it pretty well. You know, and it goes back to your point before that. You know, we have to, for this code amendment, we have to have it, you know, very much be addressed or geared to the you know, our scope, which is the impervious coverage. Not that we haven't thought of these other things, and you know, we would like to see some other things, but that would need to be addressed elsewhere, you know, in another code amendment, or you know, the code reform or something.
So I see three more questions, which we'll go over, and we only have 10 minutes left until we're hit 7. So we're gonna try and wrap up on time. And we will stay a little later in case y'all want to unmute and just start asking questions. And I would say, okay, one question was, isn't this onerous for small homeowners where their compliance will yield a trivial impact on urban heat? And I would say it doesn't seem to be onerous to limit it to 40 to 50% because that's what all of our surrounding cities are doing right now. And it really kind of, to pay 50% of your lot is a pretty substantial amount of your front yard. So it's really, we need some percentage, you know, I don't know if 40-50% is going to be the final number that comes out of this public hearing process. But there right now, because we don't have any regulations on it, it's allowing people to do 100% paving, and that's causing a lot of negative impacts to our city.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead, Larry.
I was just going to say, yeah, I agreed. And, you know, again, that is why we are focusing on the front yard, though. You know, we think that's very achievable in the front yard. And we have shown, you know, what that looks like, and, you know, how it can be achievable. And again, you know, remember, we do have the incentives on the residential side as well that would allow you to even go up to as high as, but no higher than 50% for most of the residential districts and residential uses.
And we have one question asking about adding additional trees, and I'm assuming the context is for a residential property. But Lori, if I remember correctly, planting additional trees is not an incentive for residential, it's just for non-residential, correct?
No, it's both.
Oh, it's both, okay.
Yeah, it is both. It's above and beyond, you know, what's required
Okay.
already. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
because and honestly, the reason is because that you know, that really addresses a lot of our issues as far as not only shade, but you know, it captures so much of the stormwater and the rainfall. Um, you know, cleans the air. I mean, there's just, the trees have just a lot of benefits. So we do have on both sides.
and a question was asked about the 2023 outreach to realtor and builder associations, and if you've received any negative feedback. I'm assuming from the realtor and builder associations.
Our external stakeholder meetings. You know, we haven't really received any our feedback yet. I think they were still kind of waiting. We did speak with them, but we didn't get a whole lot of feedback there. I think they're still kind of taking a look at it, speaking with you know, with their membership, and you know, but we haven't really heard a whole lot. Sarah, do you
No, I mean, this
hear
is still,
something different?
I mean, in 2023, we were kind of on a different track because there were, you know, 4 parking spaces required for a duplex. So part of our, was it 2023? Yeah. 2023, I think we were proposing to reduce parking requirements for residential uses. So we
Oh.
did, so we have been talking to them on and off as we've been going through the process.
Yeah.
This is kind of a more universal approach that we're trying to take now to be more effective and helpful. And so we did talk to them, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and Lori sent over some items. I think it's the
Summer.
same things that are on our website, and they were going to think about it and get back to us.
Yes, and
Mhm.
we actually did hear, some positive feedback, especially if we're, going to have the parking code, that's with the recommendations for that and this, we've had some positive feedback. I'm sure we're still waiting for some more feedback though, and I know some of them signed up for these meetings, so I'm sure they wanted to hear a little bit more about it as well.
Okay, why didn't we make commercial properties and parking lot percentages much lower since they contribute the most to urban heat island? And
Honestly,
uh,
we looked at other cities, looked at about 23 cities, and um, the majority of the cities that have impervious coverage maximums that regulate that um, we're right in line with that. It's basically 80 to 90%. So somewhere in there is pretty much the average percentage. Um, and again, keep in mind, it's 60% for any of the lots that are abutting our parkway streets in the more flood prone areas. So, we are trying to be a lot more sensitive to those areas and making sure that those areas are protected, further protected. Um, but that honestly, that's kind of what we were thinking, and it's achievable, and um, we didn't want to be overly restrictive. We're certainly amenable to looking at other percentages, lower percentages. I know we have at one time, thought about possibly lower percentages.
yeah, and we do have a lower percentage required without incentives for our parkway streets. So I think that's going to make a big impact over there. Um, And before it gets too late, I wanted to just say, if y'all want me to make you a presenter and you wanted to turn on your video, or you don't have to turn on your video, it's not a public hearing. But if you wanted to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can say your question in your own words, or you just feel like you want to say something, feel free to do that. But we'd be happy to do that. And I think I had one last question while y'all are thinking if you want to do that or not. Let's see. I agree on commercial and parking lot percentages needing to be lower. I would like to see Dallas exceeding other cities' averages. Yeah. Good deal. Thank you. All right. I don't see any hands. So I just want to say once again, thank y'all so much for joining us and for taking an hour out of your evening around dinner time to listen to the presentation. We'll get it uploaded onto the website. If you know of others that might want to join us next time, please feel free to send them the links and invite them. And let us know if you have any questions. We have not gone to the zoning ordinance advisory committee yet, which is the first step on the road to getting it to council. So please let us know if you have any questions, and that's our contact information in the website again. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All
Have a
right.
great evening.
Bye.
And we are having another session tomorrow, same one. but we will do this same presentation again tomorrow at noon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner
Night.
Hampton.
Night. Hi. Hi.